Hello, 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 greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of greeting across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horace, and welcome back, my dear wonderful scholars, once again to the study. I'm glad to have you all with us this fine afternoon, morning, evening, or whenever it is on your end of the multiversal map. Hello there, Julian20. Yo ho ho. Yes, indeed. You're excited, I can see. And hello there, Zadium. Dr. Zadium. I almost forgot the doctor. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. Mixing up my titles. I'm glad to see you both here. Oh my goodness. Ah, how is everyone this fine, whatever time it is? I really don't have any concept of time sometimes, so please apologize. Please, not apologize, please forgive me. Oh my goodness, I am all mixed up. Julian20, utterly amazing. Well, that's good. Glad to hear that. I mean, it's wonderful to be utterly amazing. I hope you continue being utterly amazing. Ah, myself, it's been a day. A lot of work. Working on quite a bit in the study, cleaning out things, putting back things, dealing with the existential crisis that plagues all beings of this omniverse. You know, the normal stuff. Ah. Oh, hello there, Firefly. Welcome. Glad to have you here. We haven't started the story yet, so you're just in time. I hope you're doing well, Firefly. Oh my goodness. Ah, I am just full of energy, it seems, right now. Which may be a good thing, may be a bad thing. I mean, it could go either way. You want to start off every stream with a bit of energy, but if you have too much energy, well, by the time you're done, you're drained. Even an omniversal being such as myself can feel tired once in a while. I know, shocking, shocking. Firefly better than yesterday. Oh no! I hope nothing. I'm sorry to hear that something was wrong yesterday. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're better. Oh my goodness. My dear scholars, I always care about how you're doing. So, you know, if anything's wrong, I hope these streams will help you in some small way, some small manner to make you feel better. Oh my goodness. But I'm glad you're here, Firefly. Glad to have all you dear scholars here. This, well, I'm not going to go through that list of time differences again. Julian20. Oh yes, it brings joy to my humdrum life. Firefly, thought I was getting a cold, but today I'm fine. Oh, one of those one-day things. Yes, yes, I've heard of those. They can be quite an irritant. Mm-hmm. Ah, not that I have ever encountered that sort of thing, but I have heard of it from various visitors to the study. Julian20, maybe allergies. Oh, could be. I mean, I understand the allergies in some parts of the multiverse are very high. Mm. I wouldn't say the omniverse, because there are parts of the omniverse where allergies don't exist. Very unusual. Must be nice places to be. I don't have allergies. Although, well, no, I do have allergies to those mad mushrooms. But then again, I think everyone has allergies to mad mushrooms. I mean, they aren't exactly the safest things to be around. And yet we have an entire room of them. Ask me why. I don't know why. Firefly, that would be great. Understandable, understandable. Well, tonight, my dear scholars, we are going to be doing something special. We're going to be concluding our reading of Treasure Island. It's been a long journey, hasn't it? And to think it all started off with a boy in a tavern being marauded by pirates. Brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it? Let me get a quick drink of water to hydrate myself. Julian20. Pieces of 8! I shall admit, though, there were times this, whatever time it is, that I too felt a little bit odd, though it seems to have gone away for the most part, apart from the odd issue with the nose. Hmm. Who knows? Maybe some omniversal fungus got in here, which would be terrible. I mean, fungus are one of the core enemies of every book. And as a librarian, I cannot abide by any damage done to a book. Any damage. Water damage? Oh my goodness. If there was water damage, I would faint. Unit 20, can you explain what those three characters on your clock are? Hmm? The angelic beings. Well, one of them is a carving of an angel who has visited this location quite a few times. Um, yes, I mean, she, well, well, yeah, I can call her a friend. She's quite kind. She's had to borrow a few books in the past. Granted, of course, sometimes she comes at the worst possible moments, but that's like with any visitor. But she's quite kind, and I believe it is the central figure that represents her. So I'm always glad to see her. Although, you know, once in a while I need to remind her to return some books. But I am a forgiving being. Most of the time. The other two are some of the other higher celestials that I know of. Although, for some reason, their names escape me. Might be lost in the pages of the Book of Matsu. Which I don't want to open tonight. I mean, I could, technically, but, I think it would interfere with our reading. Their names are recorded there. It was probably something that I lost or forgotten. And if I've forgotten, it can't be that important, right? Union 20 sometime later, yes. Yes, sometime later. Maybe sometime I'll do another lore stream. And then we can talk about it. But for now, that will have to wait. For now, what say you we start our reading? I mean, I know I love talking to you scholars. You're all wonderful. I mean, all of you are wonderful. But, we do have time that we need to deal with. Deal with? Well, my voice. Ugh. Oh, my goodness. Goodness. Ah, we do have time that we have to deal with. And, as they say, there's no time like the present. Get another drink of hydration just in case. Huh. Can't have my voice cracking like that. Remember, to any reader or anyone, hydration is one of the most important things you can deal with. Need to keep your voice fresh. Music. Oh, my goodness. Alright then. Well, my dear scholars, sit back, relax, have a hot or cold beverage of your liking, and we'll start our reading of Treasure Island by by Robert Louis Stevenson. Excuse me again. Chapter 31. The Treasure Hunt. Flint's Pointer. "Jim," said Silver when we were alone, "if I saved your life, you saved mine, and I'll not forget it. I'd seen the doctor waving you to run for it. With the tail of my eye I did. And I'd seen you say no as plain as hearing. Jim, that's one to you. This is the first glint of hope I had since the attack failed, and I owe it to you. Owe it to you. And now, Jim, we're to go in for this here treasure hunt, with sealed orders too, and I don't like it. And you and me must stick close, back to back like, and we'll save our necks in spite of fate and fortune. Just then, a man hailed us from the fire that breakfast was ready, and we were soon seated here and there about the sand over biscuit and fried junk. They had lit a fire fit to roast an ox, and it was now grown so hot that they could only approach it from the windward, and even there not without precaution. In the same wasteful spirit they had cooked, I suppose, 3 times more than we could eat, and one of them, with an empty laugh, threw what was left into the fire. That seems like such a waste. Although these pirates don't seem like the brightest of fellows, let's be honest. Which blazed and roared again over this unusual fuel. I never in my life saw men so careless of the morrow. Hand to mouth is the only word that can describe their way of doing. And what with wasted food and sleeping sentries, though they were bold enough for a brush and be done with it, I could see their entire unfitness for anything like a prolonged campaign. Again, they're pirates. They're not trained men. So of course they're going to be a little bit lackluster in the ways they act. Not defending them, I'm just saying. They seem the type who just, are in this for the gain without an actual plan. They're all relying on Silver or someone with his charisma to lead them on. Even Silver, eating away with Captain Flint upon his shoulder, had not a word of blame for their recklessness. And this the more surprised me, for I thought he had never shown himself so cunning as he did then. "Aye, mates," said he, "it's lucky you have barbecue to think for you with this here head. I got what I wanted, I did. Sure enough, they have the ship. Where they have it, I don't know yet. But once we hit the treasure, we'll have to jump about and find out. And then, mates, us that has the boats, I reckon, has the upper hand." Thus he kept running on, with his mouth full of the hot bacon. Thus he restored their hope and confidence, and I more than suspect, repaired his own at the same time. "As for hostage," he continued, "that's his last talk, I guess, with them he loves so dear. I've got my piece o' news, and thank ye to him for that. But it's over and done. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting, for we'll keep him like so much gold in case of accidents, you mark. And in the meantime, once we got the ship and treasure both, and off to sea like jolly companions, why, then we'll talk Mr. Hawkins over, we will, and we'll give him his share, to be sure, for all his kindness." It was no wonder the men were in a good humor now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. Should the scheme he had now sketched prove feasible, Silver, already doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He had still a foot in either camp, and there was no doubt he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape from hanging, which was the best he had to hope on our side. If they could even get him pardoned. I mean, even then, he has done quite a bit by English law, let's put it that way, that getting a pardon might be a bit of a stretch even with the others vouching for him. Where was I? Nay, And even if things so fell out that he was forced to keep his faith with Dr. Livesey, even then what danger lay before us? What a moment that would be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life. He, a cripple, and I, a boy, against 5 strong and active seamen. Add to this double apprehension the mystery that still hung over the behavior of my friends, their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable secession of the chart, or harder still to understand, the doctor's last warning to Silver. Look out for squalls when you find it, and you will readily believe how little taste I found in my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my companions on the quest for treasure. We made a curious figure, had anyone been there to see us, all in soiled sailor clothes, and all but me armed to the teeth. Silver had 2 guns slung about him, one before and one behind, besides the great cutlass at his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder, and gabbling odds and ends of purposeless sea talk. I had a line about my waist, and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held the loose end of the rope, now in his free hand, now between his powerful teeth. For all the world I was led like a dancing bear. The other men were variously burthened, some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been the very first necessity they brought ashore from the Hispaniola. Others laden with pork, bread, and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores I observed came from our stock, and I could see the truth of Silver's words the night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, he and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on clear water and the proceeds of their hunting. Water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot. And besides all that, when they were so short of eatables, it was not likely they would be very flush of powder. Not sure what that line actually means. Huh. Well, thus equipped, we all set out. Even the fellow with the broken head, who should certainly have kept in shadow, and straggled one after another to the beach, where the 2 gigs awaited us. Even these bore trace of the drunken folly of the pirates, one in a broken thwart, and both in their muddled and unbaled condition. Both were to be carried along with us, for the sake of safety, and so with our numbers divided between them, we set forth upon the bosom of the anchorage. My goodness. As we pulled over, there was some discussion on the chart. The Red Cross was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the terms of the note on the back, as you will hear, admitted of some ambiguity. They ran, the reader may remember, thus: tall tree, spyglass soldier, spyglass soldier. Yeah, I can't talk, apparently. Can't pronounce this word. Okay, reading's done. Can't pronounce a word. Alright. Spyglass soldier. Solder. I can't tell that word. Tall tree. Spyglass soldier. Bearing a point to the north of north-northeast. Skeleton Island. East, southeast, and by east. 10 feet. A tall tree was thus the principal mark. Now, right before us, The anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 2 to 300 feet high, adjoining on the north the sloping southern shoulder of the spyglass, and rising again towards the south into the rough, cliffy. Cliffy? Is that an actual word, cliffy? Seems like an odd descriptive, honestly, my dear scholars. Cliffy. Huh. Hold 1 second. I want to see if this is an actual word or not. Give me 1 second, my dear scholars. I'm going to check this. Cliffy, Cliffy. Seems like such an odd word. Cliffy. It is an actual... Oh my goodness, why am I leaning back that way? Oh my goodness. Ah, I need to have my dictionary closer to me. It is an actual word. Huh. I'm a little bit surprised by that. It sounds like such a strange word, too. If you think on it. Not sure why I leaned over that way. Maybe it's because my dictionary is way over here. And if I had, you know, and if I had some way of detecting my arms, that gesture would actually mean something. But no, I'm kind of surprised that's an actual word, because it seems like such a weirdly childish descriptive, like something someone would use in a hurry to describe something. As like a last minute use. But it's an actual word. Huh. Well, I learned something every day. Where was he? Cliffy eminence called the mizzenmast hill. The top of the plateau was dotted thickly with pine trees of varying height. Every here and there, one of a different species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbors, and which of these was the particular tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot and by the readings of the compass. Yet, although that was the case, every man on board the boats had picked a favorite of his own air, we were halfway over. Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. We pulled easily by Silver's directions, not to weary the hands prematurely, and after quite a long passage, landed at the mouth of the second river, that which runs down a woody cleft of the spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. At the first outset, heavy, miry ground and a matted marsh vegetation greatly delayed our progress. But by little and little the hill began to steepen and become stony underfoot, and the wood to change its character and to grow in a more open order. It was indeed a most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching. A heavy scented broom and many flowering shrubs had almost taken the place of grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns and the broad shadow of the pines, and the first mingled their spice with the aroma of the others. Oh, that's a wonderful descriptor. I can almost smell the nutmeg. The air besides was fresh and stirring, and this under the sheer sunbeams was a wonderful refreshment to our senses. Oh, sorry about that, my dear scholars. Had to pause for a second there. The party spread itself abroad, and in a fan shape, shouting and leaping to and fro, about the center and a good way behind the rest, Silver and I followed. I tethered by my rope, he plowing with deep pants among the sliding gravel. From time to time, indeed, I had to lend him a hand, or he must have missed his footing and fallen backward down the hill. We had thus proceeded for about half a mile, and were approaching the brow of the plateau, when the man upon the farthest left began to cry aloud as if in terror. Shout after shout came from him, and the others began to run in his direction. "He can't have found the treasure," said old Morgan, hurrying past us from the right, "for that's so clean a top." Indeed, as we found when we also reached the spot, it was something very different. At the foot of the pretty big pine, and involved in a green creeper, which had even partially lifted some of the smaller bones, a human skeleton lay, with a few shreds of clothing on the ground. I believe a chill struck for a moment to every heart. "He was a seaman," said George Mary, who, bolder than the rest, had gone up close, and was examining the rags of clothing. "Leastwise, that is good sea-cloth." "Aye, aye," said Silver. "Like enough you wouldn't look to find a bishop here, I reckon. But what sort of a way is that for bones to lie? 'Tain't in natur." Indeed, on a second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy that the body was in a natural position. But for some disarray, the work perhaps of the birds that had fed upon him, or of the slowly growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains, the man lay perfectly straight, his feet pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head like a diver's, pointing directly in the opposite. "I've taken a notion into my own numbskull," observed Silver. "Here's a compass. There's the tip-top point o' Skeleton Island, sticking out like a tooth. Just take a bearing, will you, along the line of them bones." It was done. The body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read duly, east, southeast, and by east. "I thought so," cried the cook. "This here is a pointer. Right up there is our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars. But, by thunder, if it don't make me cold inside to think of Flint, this is one of his jokes, and no mistake. Him and these 6 were alone here. He killed 'em, every man. And this one he hauled here, and laid down by compass, shiver me timbers. They're long bones, and the hair's been yellow. Aye, that would be Allardyce. You mind Allardyce, Tom Morgan?" "Aye, aye," returned Morgan. "I mind him. He owed me money, he did, and took my knife ashore with him." "Speaking of knives," said another, "why don't we find his and lying around? Flint weren't the man to pick a seaman's pocket, and the birds, I guess, would leave it be." "By the powers, and that's true," cried Silver. "There ain't a thing left here," said Mary, still feeling round among the bones. "Not a copper dolt, nor a baccy box. It don't look natural to me." "No, by gum, it don't," agreed Silver. "Not natural, nor not nice, says you. Great guns, messmates. But if Flint was living, this would be a hot spot for you and me. 6 they were, and 6 are we. And bones is what they are now." "I saw him dead with these here deadlights," said Morgan. "Billy took me in. There he lay, with penny pieces on his eyes." "Dead, aye. Sure enough, he's dead and gone below," said the fellow with the bandage. "But if ever spirit walked, It would be Flint's. Dear heart, but he died bad, did Flint. Aye, that he did, observed another. Now he raged, and now he hollered for the rum, and now he's saying 15 men were his only son mates, and I tell you true, I never rightly liked to hear it since. It was made hot, and the windy was open, and I hear that old sun coming out as clear, and the death hole of the man already. Come, come, said Silver. Stow this talk. He's dead, and he don't walk. That I know. Leastways, he won't walk by day, and you may lay to that. Care killed a cat. Fetch ahead for the doubloons. We started, certainly, but in spite of the hot sun and the staring daylight, the pirates no longer ran separate and shouting through the wood, but kept side by side and spoke with bated breath. The terror of the dead buccaneer had fallen on their spirits. Well, I'd be a little bit spooked too if I happened to run into a dead body in the middle of the jungle like that. It's interesting. Oh my goodness, 1 second. I think I'm gonna. Oh, maybe not. I think I'm gonna. Nah. It's interesting to note that I'm gonna compare this to the 1950 Disney version. In the 1950 Disney version, they actually very much shortened the discussion about the skeleton. In that Silver immediately recognizes who it is that he's seen on the beach. He doesn't need to observe the clothes or the hair, which makes sense because in the 1950 version, it's just a straight up skeleton. There's nothing left of it. And there's hints in the 1950 version that Silver was there, not when the treasure was buried, but on the route on the island in some way, because he knows the men who did die there. It's kind of iffy. But it is interesting that they forced to shorten it because, of course, the movie's a lot shorter than the novel. I'm trying to think if there anything else that came out in this chapter that I noted. It's interesting that, I'm trying to think. Although we pretty much know by this point the pirates are kind of useless as pillagers, let's be honest. And that if it wasn't for Silver, any of these pirates would probably be dead by now. Let's put it that way. But I digress, my dear scholars. Let's continue our reading to the next chapter. Excuse me. Chapter 32. The Treasure Hunt. The Voice Among the Trees. Partially from the damping influence of this alarm, partially to rest Silver and the sick folk, the whole party sat down as soon as they had gained the brow of the ascent. The plateau being somewhat tilted towards the west, this spot on which we had paused commanded a wide prospect on either hand. Before us, over the treetops, we beheld the Cape of the Woods, fringed with surf. Behind, we not only looked down upon the anchorage and Skeleton Island, but saw, clear across the spit and the eastern lowlands, a great field of open sea upon the east. Sheer above us rose the spyglass, here dotted with single pines, there black with I'm sorry, I'm trying to word this right. There black with precipices. There we go. There was no sound but that of the distant breakers, mounting from all round, and the chirp of countless insects in the brush. Not a man, not a sail upon the sea, The very largeness of the view increased the sense of solitude. Silver, as he sat, took certain bearings with his compass. "There are 3 tall trees," said he, "about in the right line from Skeleton Island. Spyglass Soldier, I take it, means that lower point there. It's child's play to find the stuff now. I've half a mind to dine first." "I don't feel sharp," growled Morgan. "Thinking of Flint, I think it has done me." "Ah, well, my son, you praise your stars he's dead," said Silver. "He was an ugly fellow, ugly devil," cried a third pirate with a shudder. "What, blue in the face too?" "That was how the rum took him," added Mary. "Blue? Well, I reckon he was blue. That's the true word." Ever since they had found the skeleton and got upon this train of thought, they had spoken lower and lower. They had almost got to whispering by now, so that the sound of their talk hardly interrupted the silence of the wood. I'm just looking ahead just to get this voice right, my dear scholars. Give me one moment. I want to make sure that this voice is correct. Okay, I had to look ahead just to figure out who the voice was, and yeah, now I know. So that the sound of their talk hardly interrupted the silence of the wood. All of a sudden, out of the middle of the trees in front of us, a thin, high, trembling voice struck up the well-known air in words. "15 men on the dead men's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum." I never have seen men more dreadfully affected than the pirates. The color went from their 6 faces like enchantment. Some leaped to their feet, some clawed hold of others. Morgan groveled on the ground. "It's Flint, by—" No, I got the wrong voice. "It's Flint, by—" cried Mary. The song had stopped as suddenly as it began. Broken off, you would have said, in the middle of a note, as though someone had laid his hand upon the singer's mouth. Coming so far through the clear, sunny atmosphere among the green tree tops, I thought it sounded airily and sweetly, and the effect on my companions was the stranger. "Come," said Silver, struggling with his ashen lips to get the word out. "This won't do. Stand by to go about. This is a rum start, and I can't name the voice, but it's someone skylarking, someone that's flesh and blood, and you may lay to that." His courage had come back as he spoke, and some of the color to his face along with it. Already the others had begun to lend an ear to this encouragement, and were coming a little to themselves, when the same voice broke out again, and not this time singing, but in a faint distant hail that echoed yet fainter among the clefts of the spyglass. "Darby McGraw!" it wailed, for that is the word that best described the sound. "Darby McGraw! Darby McGraw!" Again and again and again, and then raising a little higher, and with an oath that I leave out, "Fetch off the rum, Darby!" The buccaneers remained rooted to the ground, their eyes starting from their heads. Long after the voice had died away, they still stared in silence, dreadfully, before them. "That fixes it," gasped one. "Let's go." What was his last words? Moaned Morgan. His last words above board. Dick had his Bible out and was praying volubly. He had been well brought up, had Dick, before he came to sea and fell among bad companions. Still, Silver was unconquered. I could hear his teeth rattle in his head, but he had not yet surrendered. Nobody on yeah, nobody in this here island ever heard of Darby, he muttered. Not one but us that's here. And then, making a great effort, Shipmates, he cried, I'm here to get that stuff, and I'll not be beat by man nor devil. I never was feared of Flint in his life, and by the powers I'll face him dead. There's 700,000 pound not a quarter of a mile from here. When did ever a gentleman or fortune show his stern to that much dollars for a boozy old seaman with a blue mug, and him dead too? But there was no sign of reawakening courage in his followers. Rather, indeed, of growing terror at the irrelevance of his words. "Belay there, John," said Mary. "Don't you cross the spirit." And the rest were all too terrified to reply. They would have run away severely had they dared, but fear kept them together, and kept them close by John, as if his daring helped them. He, on his part, had pretty well fought his weakness down. "Spirits? Well, maybe," he said, "but there's one thing not clear to me. There was an echo. Now, no man ever see a spirit with a shadow. Well, then, what's he doing with an echo to him? I should like to know. That ain't in nature, surely." This argument seemed weak enough to me, but you can never tell what will affect the superstitious. And to my wonder, George Merry was greatly relieved. "Well, that's so," he said. "You're a head upon your shoulders, John, and no mistake. 'Bout shipmates, this here crew is on a wrong track, I do believe. And come to think of on it, it was like Flint's voice, I grant you, but not so clear a way like it, after all. It was liker somebody else's voice now. It was liker—" "By the powers! Ben Gunn!" roared Silver. "Aye, and so it were," cried Morgan, springing on his knees. "Ben Gunn it were." "I don't make you much odds, do it, now?" asked Dick. "Ben Gunn's not here in the body, any more in Flint." But the older hands greeted this remark with scorn. "Why, nobody minds Ben Gunn," cried Mary. "Dead or alive, nobody minds him." It was extraordinary how their spirits had returned, and how their natural color had revived in their faces. Soon they were chatting together, with intervals of listening, and not long after, hearing no further sound, they shouldered the tools and set forth again. Mary walking first with Silver's compass to keep them on the right line with Skeleton Island. He had said the truth, dead or alive, nobody minded Ben Gunn. This is interesting because in the movie, the 1950 movie at least, I can't remember the rest. In the 1950 movie, this whole bit with the voices and with the starling is not in there, which is a little bit, I think it feels a little bit strange, honestly, because you would think they'd include that, since it is a little bit of a way the pirates are delayed. But I suppose they wanted to get the pirates to a certain point in the story, so they cut out this whole bit. It's interesting. Dick alone still held his Bible, and looked about him as he went with fearful glances. But he found no sympathy, and Silver even joked him on his precautions. "I told you," said he, "I told you, You had spoiled your Bible. If it ain't no good to swear by, what do you suppose a spirit would give for it? Not that! And he snapped his big fingers, halting a moment on his crutch. But Dick was not to be comforted. Indeed, it was soon plain to me that the lad was falling sick, hastened by heat, exhaustion, and the shock of his alarm. The fever, predicted by Dr. Livesey, was evidently growing swiftly higher. It was fine open walking here, upon the summit. Our way lay a little downhill, for, as I have said, the plateau tilted towards the west. The pines, great and small, grew wide apart, and even between the clumps of nutmeg and azalea, wide open spaces baked in the hot sunshine. Striking as we did, pretty near northwest across the island, we drew, on the other hand, ever nearer under the shoulders of the spyglass, and on the other, looked even ever wider over that western bay where I had once tossed and trembled in the coracle. The first of the tall trees was reached, and by the bearing proved the wrong one. So with the second. The third rose nearly 200 feet into the air above a clump of underwood, a giant of a vegetable with a red column as big as a cottage, and a wide shadow around in which a company could have maneuvered. Oh, hello there, Zoriex. Welcome to our little reading. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea. But hello there! Glad to have you here. We are in the middle of reading Treasure Island. I'm glad to have a new listener in. Where was I? It was conspicuous far to sea both on the east and west, and might have been entered as a sailing mark upon the chart. But it was not its size that now impressed my companions. It was the knowledge that 700,000 pounds in gold lay somewhere buried below its spreading shadow. Oh my goodness, that is a lot of gold. I wonder how much that is in today's money. Not that I need money, of course, but it would be interesting to know. Whatever it is, it's a lot. The thought of the money, as they drew nearer, swallowed up their previous terrors. Their eyes burned in their heads, their feet grew speedier and lighter. Their whole soul was bound up in that fortune, that whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay waiting there for each of them. Kintron, that'd be a lot of booty. Hello there, Kintron. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Always glad to have you here, my dear wolf friend. We're on our second chapter out of 4 for tonight. That whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay waiting there for each of them. Silver hobbled, grunting on his crutch. His nostrils stood out and quivered. He cursed like a madman when the flies settled on his hot and shiny countenance. He plucked furiously at the line that held me to him, and from time to time turned his eyes upon me with a deadly look. Certainly, he took no pains to hide his thoughts, and certainly I read them like print. In the immediate nearness of the gold, all else had been forgotten. His promise and the doctor's warning were both things of the past, and I could not doubt that he hoped to seize upon the treasure, find and board the Hispaniola under cover of night, cut every honest throat about that island, and sail away as he had at first intended, laden with crimes and riches. Union 20, our favorite Kintron. Kintron, are there others? Union 20, heavens no, there is no other Kintron like you, Kintron. For better or for worse, there is no Kintron like you. Shaken as I was with these alarms, it was hard for me to keep up with the rapid pace of the treasure hunters. Now and again I stumbled, And it was then that Silver plucked so roughly at the rope and launched at me his murderous glances. Dick, who had dropped behind us and now brought up the rear, was babbling to himself both prayers and curses as his fever kept rising. This also added to my wretchedness, and to crown all, I was haunted by the thought of the tragedy that had once been acted on that plateau, when that ungodly buccaneer with the blue face, he who died at Savannah, singing and shouting for drink, had there, with his own hand, cut down his 6 accomplices. This grove that was now so peaceful must then have run with cries, I thought, and even with the thought I could believe I heard it ringing still. We were now at the margin of the thicket. Huzzah, mate! I gotta get this voice right. It's hard to do Mary's voice. Let me get a drink of water quickly. Okay, there we are. Huzzah, mates! All together! Shouted Mary, and the foremost broke into a run. And suddenly, not 10 yards further, we beheld them stop. A low cry arose. Silver doubled his pace, digging away with the foot on his crutch like one possessed, and next moment he and I had come also to a dead halt. Before us was a great excavation, not very recent, for the sides had fallen in and grass had sprouted on the bottom. In this were the shaft of a pick broken in two, and the boards of several packing cases strewn around. On one of these boards I saw branded with a hot iron the name Walrus, the name of Flint's ship. All was clear to probation. The catch had been found and rifled. The 700,000 pounds were gone. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, someone beat them to it. Oh my goodness. Well now, wonder what that's all about. We're gonna read more. We're gonna read the next 2 chapters coming up. I do want to say before we get to it, when we do, because I have read this book before, when we get to the reason, I will applaud, I will commend Robert Louis Stevenson for this. There is a very realistic and logical reason that this happened. And it's actually kind of brilliant in a way. Yeah, as I mentioned before, it's interesting they cut out all that Ben Gunn stuff. Although I suppose it didn't really add to the tale. That much in terms of like the movie adaptations. Trying to think. Is there anything else I can remember that's interesting about this show? Well, they spent a lot more time, focusing on the pirates' reaction to the body and their superstitions. And I kind of like that Silver points out that why would a ghost have an echo? He says himself, ghosts are not natural things, so by large, they shouldn't follow the natural laws. So why would a ghost's voice have an echo to it? Although, of course, in plenty of media, they do give echoes to ghosts' voice to make them sound ghostly. But in this case, he's not wrong. I mean, it's kind of a brilliant way of looking at it. I do feel sorry for Dick, though. Which Yeah, I don't think Dick's in the 1950 movie either. They've got a lot of characters in it, but I think Dick is actually written out as well. It's interesting. Any, anyway, I think we should continue and find out what happened to that treasure. Excuse me. Chapter 23: The Fall of a Chieftain. There never was such an overturn in this world. Each of these 6 men was as though he had been struck. But with Silver, the blow passed almost instantly. Every thought of his soul had been set full stretch like a racer on that money. Well, he was brought up in a single second, dead. He kept his head, found his temper, and changed his plan before the others had had time to realize the disappointment. "Jim," he whispered, "take that, and stand by for trouble." And he passed me a double-barreled pistol. At the same time, he began quietly moving northward, and in a few steps had put the hollow between us two and the other 5. Then he looked at me and nodded, as much as to say, "Here is a narrow corner," as indeed I thought it was. His looks were now quite friendly, and I was so revolted at these constant changes that I could not forbear whispering, "So you've changed sides again." There was no time left for him to answer in. The buccaneers, with oaths and cries, began to leap one after another into the pit and to dig with their fingers, throwing the boards aside as they did so. Morgan found a piece of gold. He held it up with a perfect spout of oaths. It was a 2-guinea piece, and it went from hand to hand among them for a quarter of a minute. "2 guineas!" roared Mary, shaking it at Silver. "That's your 700,000 pounds, is it? You're the man for bargains, ain't you? You're him that never bungled nothing, you wooden-headed lubber." "Take away, boys," said Silver with the coolest insolence. "You'll find some pig nuts, and I shouldn't wonder." "Pig nuts!" repeated Mary in a scream. "Mates, do you hear that? I tell you now, that man there knew it all along. Look in the face of him, and you'll see it wrote there." "Ah, Mary," remarked Silver, "standing for captain again. You're a pushing lad, to be sure." But this time everyone was entirely in Mary's favor. They began to scramble out of excavation, darting furious glances behind them. One thing I observed which looked well for us. Looked well for us. They all got out upon the opposite side from Silver. Well, there we stood, 2 on one side, 5 on the other, the pit between us, and nobody screwed up high enough to offer the first blow. Silver never moved. He watched them very upright on his crutch, and looked as cool as ever I saw him. He was brave, and no mistake. At last, Mary seemed to think a speech might help matters. "Mates," says he, "there's 2 of them alone there. One's the old cripple that brought us all here, and blundered us down to this. The other's that cub that I mean to have the heart of. Now, mates!" He was raising his arm and his voice, and plainly meant to lead a charge. But just then, crack! 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 3 musket shots flashed out of the thicket. Mary tumbled head foremost into the excavation. The man with the bandage spun round like a teetotum, and fell all his length upon his side, where he lay dead, but still twitching, and the other 3 turned and ran for it with all their might. Before you could wink, Long John had fired 2 barrels of a pistol into the struggling Mary, and the man rolled up his eyes at him in the last agony. "George," said he, "I reckon I settled you." At the same moment, the doctor, Gray, and Ben Gunn joined us, with smoking muskets from among the nutmeg trees. "Forward!" cried the doctor. "Double quick, my lads! We must head 'em off the boats!" And we set off at a great pace, sometimes plunging through the bushes to the chest. I tell you, but Silver was anxious to keep up with us. The work that man went through, leaping on his crutch till the muscles of his chest were fit to burst, was work no sound man ever equaled. And so thinks the doctor. As it was, he was already 30 yards behind us, and on the verge of strangling when we reached the brow of the slope. "Doctor," he hailed, "see there! No hurry!" And sure enough, there was no hurry. In a more open part of the plateau, we could see the 3 survivors still running in the same direction as they had started, right for Mizzenmast Hill. We were already between them and the boats, and so we 4 sat down to breathe, while Long John, mopping his face, came slowly up with us. Okay, another hydration. Goodness. Excuse me. "Thank ye kindly, doctor," says he. "You came in about the nick, I guess, for me and Hawkins. And so it's you, Ben Gunn," he added. "Well, you're a nice one, to be sure." I'm Ben Gunn, I am," replied the man, wriggling like an eel in his embarrassment. "And," he added after a long pause, "how do, Mr. Silver? Pretty well, I think he says you." Ben," murmured Silver, "to think as you've done me." The doctor sent back Gray for one of the pickaxes, deserted in their flight by the mutineers, and then, as he proceeded leisurely downhill to where the boats were lying, related in a few words what had taken place. It was a story that profoundly interested Silver, and Ben Gunn, the half-idiot man, was the hero from beginning to end. Ben, in his long, lonely wanderings about the island, had found the skeleton. It was he that had rifled it. He had found the treasure. He had dug it up. It was the haft of his pickaxe that lay broken in the excavation. So, okay, I'm going to pause here. So, again, I like that Robert Louis Stevenson does this. He logically points out that if you have a man stuck on an island which has buried treasure on it, no doubt sooner or later that man is going to find that treasure. Well, man or woman or whoever is going to find that treasure. It's only a matter of time. So the fact that Ben Gunn found it is one of the most logical things that could happen in this story. He would have beaten them to it no matter what, because he has the time. He has nothing else to do on this island, and he somewhat knows what Flint had done. I think that was kind of a brilliant twist that Stevenson had come up with. He had carried it on his back in many weary journeys, from the foot of a tall pine to a cave he had on the two-pointed hill at the northeast angle of the island. There it had laid stored in safety since 2 months before the arrival of the Hispaniola. When the doctor had wormed the secret from him on the afternoon of the attack, and when next morning he saw the anchorage deserted, he had gone to Silver, given him the chart, which was now useless, given him the stores, for Ben Gunn's cave was well supplied with goat meat. That with goat's meat salted by himself. It would have to have salted meat, wouldn't it? Given anything and everything to get a chance of moving in safety from the stockades to the two-pointed hill, there to be clear of malaria and keep a guard upon the money. As for you, Jim, he said, it went against my heart, but I did what I thought best for those who had stood by their duty, and if you are not one of these, whose fault was it? That morning, finding that I was to be involved in the horrid disappointment he had prepared for the mutineers, he had run all the way to the cave, and leaving Squire to guard the captain, had taken Gray and and the man and started making the diagonal across. And started. Yeah, I am tripping over my own words because I'm getting excited, my dear scholars. And started making the diagonal across the island to be at hand beside the pine. Soon, however, he saw that our party had the start of him. Excuse me. And Ben Gunn, being fleet of foot, had been dispatched in front to do his best alone. Then it had occurred to him to work upon the superstitions of his former shipmates, and he was so far successful that Gray and the doctor had come up and were already ambushed before the arrival of the treasure hunters. "Ah," said Silver, "it was fortunate for me that I had Hawkins here. You would have let old John be cut to bits. Had never given it a thought, Doctor." "Not a thought," replied Dr. Lucy cheerily. Oh, that's rather bloodthirsty. And by this time we had reached the gigs. The doctor with the pickaxe demolished one of them, and then we all got aboard the other, and set out to go round, by sea, for North Inlet. This was a run of 8 or 9 miles. Silver, though he was almost killed already with fatigue, was set to an oar, like the rest of us, and we were soon skimming swiftly over a smooth sea. Soon we passed out of the straits and doubled the southeast corner of the island, round which, 4 days ago, we had towed the Hispaniola. As we passed the two-pointed hill, we could see the black mouth of Ben Gunn's cave, and a figure standing by it, leaning on a musket. It was the squire, and we waved a handkerchief and gave him 3 cheers, in which the voice of Silver joined as heartily as any. "3 miles farther, just inside the mouth of North Inlet, what should we meet but the Hispaniola, cruising by herself. The last flood had lifted her, and had there been much wind or a strong tide current, as in the southern anchorage, we should never have found her more, or found her stranded beyond help. As it was, there was little amiss, beyond the wreck of the mainsail. Another anchor was got ready, and dropped in a fathom and a half of water. We all pulled round again to Rum Cove, the nearest point for Ben Gunn's treasure house, and then Gray, single-handed, returned with the gig to the Hispaniola, where he was to pass the night on guard. Excuse me. A gentle slope ran up from the beach to the entrance of the cave. At the top the squire met us. To me he was cordial and kind, saying nothing of my escapade, either in the way of blame or praise. At Silver's polite salute, he somewhat flushed. "John Silver," he said, "you're a prodigious villain, an impostor, a monstrous impostor, sir. I am told I am not to prosecute you. Well then, I will not. But the dead men, sir, hang about your neck like millstones." "Thank ye kindly, sir," replied Long John, again saluting. "I dare you to thank me," cried the squire. "It is a gross dereliction of my duty. Stand back." Need to get more water. And thereupon we all entered the cave. It was a large, airy place, with a little spring and a pool of clear water, overhung with ferns. The floor was sand. Before a big fire lay Captain Smollett, and in a great corner, only duskily flickered over by the blaze, I beheld great heaps of coin, and quadrilaterals built of bars of gold. That was Flint's treasure that we had come so far to seek, and that had cost already the lives of 17 men from the Hispaniola. How many it had cost in the amassing! What blood and sorrow, what good ships scuttled on the deep, what brave men walking the plank blindfold, what shot of cannon, what shame and lies and cruelty, perhaps no man alive could tell. Yet there were still three upon that island, Silver and old Morgan and Ben Gunn, who had each taken his share in these crimes, as each had hoped in vain to share in the reward. "Come in, Jim," said the captain. "You're a good boy in your line, Jim, but I don't think you and me'll go to sea again. You're too much of the born favourite for me. Is that you, John Silver? What brings you here, man?" "Come back to my duty, sir," returned Silver. "Ah," said the captain, and that was all he said. What a supper I had of it that night, with all my friends around me, and what a meal it was, with Ben Gunn's salted goat, and some delicacies, and a bottle of old wine from the Hispaniola. Never, I am sure, were people gayer or happier, and there was Silver, sitting back almost out of the firelight, but eating heartily, prompt to spring forward when anything was wanted, even joining quietly in our laughter, the same bland, polite, obsequious seaman of the voyage out. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think all versions follow this bit of them finding the gold later in Ben Gunn's cave. Um, in the 1950 version, Mary and the injured man and one other are not the only men who get killed on the in the hole. And in fact, most of them. Oh, thank you for the follow. Hey, Gupitan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. I'm sometimes terrible with pronouncing names correctly, but thank you for the follow. Oh, and thank you for the hydrate redeem. Oh my goodness. I'll need it. We are just heading into the final stretch of the novel, and I'm just doing a little discussion between chapters about some of the differences I've noticed between this book and some of the movie versions. I am so glad to have you join our little group. Um, for those who are new to the study, I am Matsu Quinox, interdimensional omniversal librarian, streaming Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays are usually a gaming stream, and Thursdays are usually a reading stream. And I'm glad to have you all here. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, yes. So it is interesting that in the movie version, the 1950 movie version, everyone gets killed. All the pirates, last mutineers, gets killed, including Morgan. And it's not even Ben Gunn or the Doctor who saves them. It is just Silver who kills them straight up, which is very cold-blooded. Um, and they don't actually spend that much time in the cave. Silver is fairly cagey in that scene in the 1950 version. But again, they compress time in the movie, so they don't have enough time to show them eating dinner or any of that sort of thing. Kintron, Tuesdays, games, puns, both. We do not do puns here, Kintron. You know that. Puns, oh, don't even get me started on puns. Puns are the bane of my existence. But I digress. As I was saying, it is interesting. The though in this version, as they in the original novel, Morgan gets away. I think he's the only survivor out of that bunch, which is again pretty interesting. Although, yeah, no, did two? I think three got shot, and I think two escaped because there were five of them. So two of them escaped, Morgan and one other. I think Dick didn't die. I don't think Dick died. I think he's still alive, or at least ill. At least there was no mention of him dying. Let's take a quick look back. Mary Craig. No, three escaped. Three escaped. Only Mary and the man with the bandage got killed. The other three escaped into the woods. Which, wonder what's going to happen to them. Well, shall we find out, my dear scholars? I think we should. Chapter 34. And last. The next morning we fell early to work, for the transportation of this great mass of gold near a mile by land to the beach, and thence 3 miles by boat to the Hispaniola, was a considerable task for so small a number of workmen. The three fellows still abroad upon the island did not greatly trouble us. A single sentry on the shoulder of the hill was sufficient to ensure us against any sudden onslaught, and we thought, besides, they had had more than enough of fighting. Therefore the work was pushed on briskly. Gray and Ben Gunn came and went with the boats, while the rest, during their absences, piled treasure on the beach. Two of the bars slung in a rope's end made a good load for a grown man, one that he was glad to work slowly with. For my part, as I was not much use at carrying, I was kept busy all day in the cave, packing the minted money into bread bags. It was a strange collection, like Billy Bones' hoard for the diversity of coinage, but so much larger and so much more varied that I think I never had more pleasure than in sorting them. English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Georges and Louis, doubloons and double guineas, and moidors, not sure what that is, and sequins, the pictures of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years, strange oriental pieces stamped with what looked like wisps of string or bits of spiderweb, round pieces and square pieces and pieces bored through the middle, as if to wear them round your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world must, I think, have found a place in that collection. And for a number, I am sure they were like autumn leaves, so that my back ached with stooping and my fingers with sorting them out. Day after day, this work went on. By every evening, a fortune had been stowed aboard. But there was another fortune waiting for the morrow, and all this time we heard nothing of the three surviving mutineers. At last, I think it was on the third night, the doctor and I were strolling on the shoulder of the hill, where it overlooks the lowlands of the isle, when, from out the thick darkness below, the wind brought us a noise between shrieking and singing. It was only a snatch that reached our ears, followed by the former silence. "Heaven forgive them," said the doctor. "'Tis the mutineers." "All drunk, sir," struck in the voice of Silver from behind us. Silver, I should say, was allowed his entire liberty, and in spite of daily rebuffs, seemed to regard himself once more as quite a privileged and friendly dependent. Indeed, it was remarkable how well he bore these slights, and with what unwearied politeness he kept on trying to integrate himself with all. Yet I think none treated him better than a dog, unless it was Ben Gunn, who was still terribly afraid of his old quartermaster, or myself, who had really something to thank him for. Although for that matter I suppose I had reason to think even worse of him than anybody else, for I had seen him meditating a fresh treachery upon the plateau. Accordingly, it was pretty gruffly that the doctor answered him. Drunk or raving, said he. Right you were, sir, replied Silver, and precious little odds which to you and me. I suppose you would hardly ask me to call you a humane man, returned the doctor with a sneer. And so my feelings may surprise you, Master Silver, but if I were sure they were raving, as I am morally certain one, as at least, of them is down with fever, I should leave this camp, and whatever risk to my own carcass takes them the assistance of my skill. Ask your pardon, sir, you would be very wrong, quoth Silver. You would lose your precious life, and you may lay to that. I am on your side now, hand and glove, and I shouldn't wish for to see the party weakened, let alone yourself, seeing as I know what I owes you. But these men down there, they couldn't keep their word, no, not supposin' they wished to, and what's more, they couldn't believe as you could. No, said the doctor, you're the man to keep your word, we know that. And well, that was about the last news we had of the three pirates. Only once we heard a gunshot a great way off, and supposed them to be hunting. A council was held, and it was decided that we must desert them on the island. To the huge glee, I must say, of Ben Gunn, and with the strong approval of Gray. You know, I, I have to say, the pirates are getting off a lot better than they did in the 1950 movie. That is, if you consider being marooned on an island with no one else to be a mercy. Excuse me. We left a good stock of powder and shot, the bulk of the salt goat, a few medicines, and some other necessities. Tools, clothing, a spare sail, a fathom or two of rope, and by the particular desire of the doctor, a handsome present of tobacco. That was about our last doing on the island. Before that we had got the treasure stowed, and had shipped enough water and the remainder of the goat meat, in case of any distress. And at last, one fine morning, we weighed anchor, which was about all that we could manage, and stood out of North Inlet, the same colors flying that the captain had flown, and fought under, at the palisade. Need a quick other hydration. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think I'm running out of hydration. Oh dear. But I don't have many pages. I don't have many pages to go, so I don't know if I need to grab any more. Where was I? The three fellows must have been watching us closer than we thought, for as soon as let me read that again. The three fellows must have been watching us closer than we thought for, as we soon had proved. I'll say this about the study. It's very useful to have new friends once in a while helping. Um, Orvid, who is new to the study, just was very kindly handing me some more liquid hydration. Ovid's Ovid's very shy, So maybe sometime I will introduce you all to him. For now, he tends to hide among some of the books when he is not trying to help. Kinshon, I did think they seemed pretty tame. Some are, some aren't. But Ovid and Virgil, who I will have to introduce as well sometime. They're both quite friendly, unlike some others. Thankfully, surprisingly. Where was I? The three fellows must have been watching us closer than we thought for, as we soon had proved. For, coming through the Narrows, we had to lie very near the southern point, and there we saw all three of them kneeling together on a spit of sand, with their arms raised in supplication. It went all to our hearts, I think, to leave them in that wretched state, but we could not risk another mutiny, and to take them home for the giblet would have been a cruel sort of kindness. It would be a cruel sort of kindness, given what a giblet is. The doctor hailed them and told them of the stores we had left, and where they were to find them. But they continued to call us by name and appealed to us for God's sake to be merciful and not leave them to die in such a place. At last, seeing the ship still bore on her course and was now swiftly drawing out of earshot, one of them, I know not which it was, leaped to his feet with a hoarse cry, whipped his musket to his shoulder, and sent a shot whistling over Silver's head and through the mainsail. After that we kept under cover of the bulwarks, and when next I looked out, they had disappeared from the spit, and the spit itself had almost melted out of sight in the growing distance. That was at least the end of that. And before noon, to my inexpressible joy, the highest rock of Treasure Island had sunk into the blue round of sea. We were so short of men that everyone on board had to bear a hand. Only the captain lying on a mattress in the stern and giving his orders, for, though greatly recovered, he was still in want of quiet. Why? We laid our head for the nearest port in Spanish America, for we could not risk the voyage home without fresh hands, and as it was, what with baffling winds and a couple of fresh gales, we were all worn out before we reached it. It was just at sundown when we cast anchor in a most beautiful landlocked gulf, and were immediately surrounded by shore boats full of... You know what? I'm gonna skip the description of these individuals because Stevenson was a man of his time, and I don't feel comfortable reading the words he uses for some of these dear locals, so I'll just use the word locals for it. On shore by boats full of locals, selling fruits and vegetables and offering to die for bits of money. The sight of so many good-humored faces, the taste of tropical fruits, and above all, the lights that began to shine in the town made a most charming contrast to our dark and brooding sojourn on the island, and the doctor and the squire, taking me along with them, went ashore to pass the early part of the night. Here they met the captain of an English man-of-war, fell in talk with him, went on board his ship, and in short, had so agreeable a time that day was breaking when we came alongside the Hispaniola. Ben Gunn was on deck alone, and as soon as we came on board he began with wonderful contortions to make us a confession. Silver was gone. The man had connived at his escape in a shore boat some hours ago, and he now assured us he had only done so to preserve our lives, which would certainly have been forfeit if that man with the one leg had stayed aboard. But this was not all. The sea cook had not gone empty-handed. He had cut through a bulkhead unobserved and had removed one of the sacks of coin, worth perhaps 300 or 400 guineas, to help him on his further wanderings. I think we were all pleased to be so cheaply quit of him. That is, I'll talk about the end of the story and what it was like in the 1950 movie after this chapter. But it is interesting what they did in that movie compared to the novel. Let me get a little more water. Excuse me. Well, to make a long story short, we got a few hands on board, made a good cruise home, and the Hispaniola reached Bristol just as Mr. Landley was beginning to think of fitting out her corset. What is that supposed to mean? Huh. That's a weird. I wonder what that actually means. Be interesting to look into that. 5 men only of those who had sailed returned with her. Drink and the devil had done for the rest, with a vengeance. Although, to be sure, we were not quite in so bad a case as that other ship they sang about. Cool Skeleton, hello! Another streamer I watched was streaming today, so apologies for being late. You're just in time for us to actually finish the book. We're just on the last 2 pages of the book. Cool Skeleton. Although, to be sure, we were not quite in so bad a case as that other ship they sang about. With 1 man of her crew alive, what put to sea with 75? All of us had an ample share of the treasure, and used it wisely or foolishly according to our natures. Captain Smollett is now retired from the sea. Gray not only saved his money, but, being suddenly smit with the desire to rise, also studied his profession, and he is now mate and part owner of a fine full-rigged ship, married besides, and the father of a family. As for Ben Gunn, he got £1,000, which he spent or lost in 3 weeks, or to be more exact, in 19 days, for he was back begging on the 20th. Then he was given a lodge to keep exactly as he had feared upon the island, and he still lives, a great favourite, though something of a butt, with the country boys and a notable singer in church on Sundays and Saint days. Of Silver we have heard no more. That formidable seafaring man with 1 leg has at last gone clean out of my life. But I dare say he met his old wife, and perhaps still lives in comfort with her and Captain Flint. It is to be hoped so, I suppose, for his chances of comfort in another world are very small. The bar silver and the arms still lie, for all that I know, where Flint buried them, and certainly they shall lie there for me. Oxen and wain ropes would not bring me back again to that accursed island. And the worst dreams that ever I have, are when I hear the surf booming about its coasts, or start upright in bed, with the sharp voice of Captain Flint still ringing in my ears. Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! The end. Oh my goodness, my dear scholars. Let us retire to the chat area where we can talk about the story, talk about what's happening in the upcoming weeks, and take a bow. Thank you, thank you. And look for its streamer to raid. And here we are. Oh, oh my goodness. Well, what an ending. Here's an interesting thing with the 1950 version. Um, Silver escapes from the ship in the 1950 version when they're just leaving Treasure Island. They never actually get to port in the movie. And in fact, in the 1950 version, he gets away with almost all the treasure, which is another interesting change from what they did in the book, which is where all of them got to keep some of the treasure. I just realized an interesting thing is we never heard in the book what Jim does with the treasure, with his part, because he did get a portion, but they never say. And I think the reason for that is hinted at between the lines. I think the idea is that he is so sickened by the events of Treasure Island and the voyage that he just doesn't want to talk about what happened with the treasure. He most likely used it to help himself and his mother out of their issues. But it is interesting. Um, the book, of course, was a huge monumental success for Robert Louis Stevenson. Um, it was turned into plays. It was turned into movies almost immediately as when cinema came into being. There were film adaptations of Treasure Island. Unfortunately, the earliest versions are now completely gone. With the earliest version that is still existing being the 1930 version with Wallace Beery as Long John Silver and oh boy, what was his name? What was the name of that actor? Can't remember Jim's actor's name. Um, mm. And of course, there was the 1950 Disney version, which had Robert Newton as Long John Silver, whose actual natural dialect became what we think of when we think of pirate dialect, which is fascinating. Um, and of course, there were later adaptations, many later adaptations of it. There were animated adaptations, some much stranger, such as the some much stranger and more memeable, such as the Russian Soviet adaptation animated. Cool Skeleton. Oh my goodness, I'm witnessing a storm cloud lightning show outside my window. Oh, stay safe, Cool Skeleton. Stay safe. Please stay safe. Would hate anything to happen with our favorite skeleton now, would we? Um, and of course there was Muppet Treasure Island, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, and Treasure Planet, done by Disney, which I think is rather good. Um, the book was again monumentally popular. It almost was almost too popular because Robert Louis Stevenson never could really recapture the success of Treasure Island. The next book he wrote, well, one of the next books he wrote, Kidnapped, was not liked by the critics, some of whom said it was Stevenson attempting to recapture the spark that was Treasure Island, but not quite managing it. I have a copy of Kidnapped thanks to dear Kintron, and perhaps in future I will read that book. I have never read it, so it would be an exciting read. Um, but yeah, Treasure Island has in many ways shaped our perception of pirates, buried treasure, pirates on this pirate's shoulder, pieces of eight, and all that. It has become one of the cornerstones of pirate fiction, if not the golden standard by all pirate fiction is looked at. So yes, I think I enjoyed the reading. I'm glad all you scholars were here for it, and I am very happy to have everyone here and to all of you this fine book. So future weeks. Okay. So Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Time, I will be joining Sophia Ignace and Kanabo in a stream where Sophia will be unboxing a box of books and will be commenting on it. You'll be on Sophia Ignace's channel. I hope you'll all be there. Rather excited to be there myself as a guest. Um, Next Tuesday we will be if everything goes according to plan. Always asterisks if everything goes according to plan. Um, Next Tuesday we'll be playing more of A Little to the Left. I don't know how much we have left in the game. I think we have quite a bit. Um, and next Thursday I'm not certain on because I have a collab reading in the works with Sophia Ignacy, which I'm looking forward to. I'm not sure on the date or when that'll be, so I will let you in. I will keep you informed, my dear scholars, when that is. And then, but our next book we're going to read, I will announce it. We are going to be reading the classic British, I want to say humor book, Three Men in a Boat, to say nothing of the dog. It is the story of exactly that, three men taking a boating trip with their pet dog and essentially talking about how things go wrong on the trip and other little tidbits of their own personal life with little very humorous asides. It is very funny. I have read some of it. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. It's also a travel log, so you get to learn a little bit about the popular travel at the time, which in this case I believe was the late 1800s, early 1900s. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book. But for now, I can feel my voice is getting a little worn out. Let's see who there is we can raid, and then I will close out our stream for tonight. Let's see. Well, Sophia is playing Submerged, hidden hidden what? Hidden Depths. Let's go raid her for tonight. So I say to you, my dear scholars, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Till we meet each other again at the study. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye bye.